Welcome to the College Football Players Association podcast. We're starting a new series here. We're calling it Alumni Member of the Month. And today, for our very first Alumni Member of the Month, we've got Mike Dotterer here. Mike, you became an alumni member, gosh, how long has it been now?
I think I'm in my second year.
Yeah, so it's been a bit, and you and I have talked a ton. And when we thought about starting this series, I was like, there's nobody I would rather start it with than Mike. I think you got a heart of gold, Mike, and you got such great stories from your playing days. So just to kick things off here, let the viewers know, what was your playing career? So walk us through sort of where you played college ball. Obviously, you played pro ball as well, as a lot of our alumni members did. And so just walk us through the years you played, school, what your pro career was like, et cetera, just to give people, kind of start of like who you are.
Sure, Jason. Well, I just want to first thank you and the College Football Players Association for kicking off this podcast. I think it's a great opportunity to get members all around the country, around the world. I'm sure there's going to be College Football Players Association members who live in parts of different parts of the world. So I just want to thank you for starting this. My background, I grew up in basically California. Played my high school football in Southern California. There's two schools I went to. One was called Modern Day High School, which I think has 2 or 3 Heisman Trophy winners. And then my senior year, I graduated from Edison High School in Huntington Beach. And in any event, I was recruited by a lot of different schools out of high school. And that was my position. I was a running back. And in baseball, I was also a baseball player. I was drafted by the New York Yankees my senior year in high school. And had I signed, Don Mattingly and I would have been teammates in the New York Penn League. But Don Mattingly had decided to play baseball. And my dad said, "Hey, Mike, you should go play football with this guy named John Elway." So,
did your dad give the right advice all these years later? What do you think?
Well, I think football's been an amazing experience. I was very fortunate. Actually, I'm in Las Vegas here getting ready for our Las Vegas Raider reunion. We were having a little reunion here in Las Vegas. So I was very fortunate to play American football at Stanford University. That's where I ended up playing. Played football and baseball 4 years there. And, when I was being recruited, I was recruited by a guy named Jim Fossil. And he ended up, he was the head football coach for the New York Giants when they went to the Super Bowl back in the early 2000s. And Coach Fossil stole me away from Harvard University. My dad wanted me to go to Harvard, and I wanted to play baseball and football in California. So Coach Fossil recruited me, and I realized back then, this was back in the late 70s, 1979.
Okay.
We have a record actually at Stanford that's will never be broken. The highest average home attendance in Stanford football history. We drew in 1980, I believe, 62,000 fans per game.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot compared to
we were
today,
entertaining. 62,000 fans. Now that's not the big house like University of Michigan, which is 100,000 people. But I realized looking back, I was having fun, but I realized the business of college athletics. It was a big business back then. And obviously today we know it's a very, very big business. I was just looking up the budget for the NC2AA. I think it's $600 or $700 million.
What do they do with all that money?
I don't know.
Nobody knows. It's one of those questions like, what are we getting for all that money? Yeah. All right. So when did you wrap up your Stanford career? What was the last year?
My last year was 1983. I was drafted by the Raiders in football and by the Yankees in baseball again, and ended up. I always say Mr. Al Davis, gave me more money than Mr. George Steinbrenner, and so I signed with the Raiders. And looking back, I hit the lottery because my rookie year, we went to the Super Bowl and we beat the Redskins. So I was very lucky compared to another guy that came out of the same year, Dan Marino. Dan Marino went to one Super Bowl and he didn't win the Super Bowl. So, I just got very lucky. And I tell people the NFL stands for not for long. And that's why, Jason, that's why college football is so critical for the future of these athletes, these players, because the longer you play American football, there's a higher likelihood that you're going to get injured. And my rookie year, I tore my anterior cruciate ligament. So it was a short career, but I enjoyed it. Looking back, I have no doubt in my mind that the College Football Players Association would have been very helpful had it been around when I played, because it was a business back then. And actually, I wanted to just say to everyone that college football has always been a business, and the financial records we were talking about earlier clearly show that the money is getting out there. I mean, it's, when you open up the books, there's a lot of money, and that's not a bad thing. It's just, is it fairly distributed? And as you know, Jason, this underscores the necessity for players to have a voice in the system. And it's essential for college football players, in my opinion, to have a union. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. I think it should be yesterday. And thanks to you and the team, you're doing it. And you're the commissioner right now. I think eventually probably the players will elect the commissioner, and every college football player, I think every team should vote for 2 representatives to serve as spokespersons. And this will provide the structure where players will have a say in the decisions that affect their lives and career.
Let me ask you this. I want to come back to that idea, because you and I have talked about this before in terms of representation, what it would actually look like in practice for current players and so forth. All right, but you said, okay, so you're at Stanford from 79 to 82 or 83, and you said it's even a big business back then. I do think there is this perception among some that there was this like glory day of amateurism, right? And it was before all the big TV contracts in the mid 80s. It was sometime like before. And what you're saying is that's not actually the case. So describe to me, like, as a historian, I'm a historian. So like, tell me, what was the big business aspect back then? Because we all have this sense of like what it is today. It's big TV contracts. It's, this sort of massive apparatus around the stadium and the athletic departments across the country. What was it like back then? How was it a business back then in your mind?
Well, it was a business because if we didn't play well, our coaches got fired.
So there's no student athlete? Or are you saying even back then?
This wasn't for fun and games. This was serious business. I mean, and, obviously the money is much greater today. But, I look back and I think to myself, if we had had a union back then, the unions would have said, hey, every player, why don't we say one of the most important things for every player is to get own some property, get real estate, And I look back, had I had that union, talking about these issues, when I was 18, 19, 20 years old, I would have probably bought a nice little home in Palo Alto back in 1981.
That would have been a nice savings account right there.
And there was no one advising me or anything. It was just, go play and you've got a scholarship and blah, blah, blah. And it just, there's no question if you talk to college athletes all across the country, we were taken advantage of. There's no doubt about it. I mean, looking back, and we were oblivious to it. I mean, I didn't think about it, but looking back, when it's your formative years, you should have people, a group, and that's why the union's so important, saying, hey, you're starting out your career, and you're part of a business. These are the things that can help you. And those weren't even discussed. It was just go play, and you've got a scholarship. Don't say too much. And it's just, thank God it's changing. And thank you, Jason, for kind of helping lead this whole cause. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. And I do think things are changing, and I think they're changing for the better. I think the player empowerment that we've seen over the past 5 years, where players are, because of NIL, because of various court cases, are getting that voice for the first time and are exercising their individual voices in wholly new ways, especially because of NIL, especially because of the freedom of movement, right? To move to new programs, which you didn't have, right? To exercise that transfer portal, to try to get a better payday for them and their families. And of course, like, we absolutely celebrate that. I think you and I, though, think, and you've already gestured towards it here talking with me, is that the next step, though, is moving from the individual level, which I think NIL has created more individual empowerment than it has collective empowerment, because we hear all of those payday stories and the guy hits the transfer portal and all that's great. How do we move from that? And even, I'll ask a tougher question. To what extent do you think that's a barrier from moving does individual empowerment create problems for collective empowerment? And how do we move? What would you say to current players out there who are listening to this podcast? Why should they move? What if they're just saying, you know what, Mike, I got my individual payday and, I'm going on in the NFL. And I don't know if I want to be a rabble rouser here and come together and create a players association. What would you say to that player to convince them?
Well, the facts are the chances of you having a long NFL career is better chance of being hit by a lightning bolt. It's just,
I know that average career, 3.5 years, right?
Yeah. So, it's important even for the great players to say, hey, I'm only one injury away from my career ending. And so, and there's nothing like being part of a great team. And I think the NIL has been fantastic. And you're absolutely right, Jason. We've had this surge for individuality and it's, I own my name, my image, and my likeness.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, it has to be balanced with, there's a collective good, that we're part of a team. And the players, I think it's critical right now in this podcast goes viral. I hope every great university and college out there listens to this podcast and says, we need to elect 2 leaders here to get in touch with Jason and start this movement. And that's exciting because it's really critical that there's a collective organization. So I agree. The NIL has been wonderful, long time coming, but it's really pivotal that we have an organization that represents the players, and that's what you're doing. So,
all right, let me ask you this, because I want to hit on something else you just said. To what extent, you play football, you play baseball, these are team sports through and through, right? Of course, you have your individual superstars, you have a quarterback that can seemingly carry a team to a Super Bowl. You have a fantastic hitter or a fantastic pitcher that can do something phenomenal for a baseball team. But these are team sports, right? These are not individual track and field athletes. These are not, tennis players that we would think of as, this is an individual sport. Do you think there's been something lost in team sports with an NIL focus on things, as opposed to, we've got league minimums and salary. And so, your backup lineman in the NFL doesn't begrudge Pat Mahomes because of his contract, because he still has the league minimum, right? And so the team solidarity maybe can still be there. Do you think we've lost something in terms of team solidarity because of NIL, or is that taking it too far?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, the pendulum is swung toward kind of the individual player. This is my game. This is my career. But it's critical for the the alumni, the players that have played in the past, to say, when you look back, I mean, I would give away every touchdown, every accolade, sit on the bench for a Rose Bowl victory. I was at Stanford for 4 years playing with arguably one of the greatest quarterbacks in history, John Elway, and we had great players as well. And we, didn't go to a bowl game. Our band came on the field the last game that we played. We're going to a bowl game. So looking back, that feeling that, gosh, you went to a Rose Bowl or you went to a big bowl game or a college football playoff. Those are memories, because when you look at your life, you can't do it by yourself. Football is a team game. As a running back, I can't run the football without the offensive linemen and the wide receivers and the quarterback and you're working together. And I would argue even individual sports. I mean, Tiger Woods taught me this, that I remember Tiger Woods saying, golf is not just an individual sport. I have my father, my golf coach, my mom, my caddy, my nutritionist. When you look at any successful athlete, there's a team of people, whether the players that are on the team or people that they're working with. So it's developing that kind of mindset. So yes, we have NIL and it's wonderful, but we also have to come together as a team, as a collective, and that's what we're doing with the College Football Players Association.
Okay. All right, let me ask you this, because here at the College Football Players Association, we are trying to do something different. This isn't, because when I started this whole thing, went on the limb, founded the organization, started organizing. You look at the NFLPA model, that cannot be our model, because the NFL is a distinct employee group, right? It's 2,000 guys. They're employees of their team. They have a collective bargaining agreement. Now, of course, the union had to form in the 80s and had to do all that work that they did to really build a strong union. But it was a union. It was straightforward, the project they were doing. In some ways, we're trying to do that, but it's so much more complicated because, of course, there's this ongoing debate as to whether college athletes are employees or not. So we're going through that. We've got unionization examples in Northwestern 10 years ago, and we've got Dartmouth men's basketball team a couple of years ago. But we had to think of a new model, and the model I built was one in which tries to bring together past, present, and future players. We thought that the players, the guys like you who played in the past, were integral to getting reach into those current players and really helping to build that kind of solidarity that is going to provide a platform from which guys could organize and eventually form a union and negotiate a CBA and do all these things that we want them to be able to do. For some former players, I'll just be honest, that's been a hard sell. Sometimes I'll get on a call with a former player and at the end they're like, I don't know, I appreciate what you're doing, but I don't want to get involved. I don't want to become an alumni member. That was not the case for you. When you and I had our first conversation, I mean, you were right on it. You're like, yep, I get it. Let me just ask you to speak to, why did you become an alumni member? And what would you say to former players out there if they're on the fence, or maybe they're just like, I don't see why I'd get involved with an organization like this? What would you say?
Well, I just think what I said earlier. I mean, if the College Football Players Association had been around when I was playing, my economic situation would have been different, because when you organize a group of players who, look at each other and say, hey, this is a business. I mean, we're not only bringing people into the stands and, hundreds and millions of people are watching, not only in person, but over the airwaves and the TV, rights to televise these games. I mean, it's big money. So it's important for the players to know that this is a business. And when you do that, you have to have some, understanding of negotiation. You have to have representation. Mm-hmm. So it was obvious to me, and I know that there will be people listening, players, former college players, that will hear this and they'll say, yep, Mike is right. We need to have an organization to because it's a big business. It's that simple. And the players, we all need to work together. The existing players, the players that are playing professional football right now, and all of the alumni like myself who look back and say, boy, this is a long time coming. And it's just, for me, it's a simple, it's easy to understand because we want the players to have the best experience possible. And the only way to do that is where they have representation. They're not just told, you do this, you do that. There's no choice. I mean, players need to have choice, and they do now with the NIL and the transfer portal. That's all fantastic. But it's now, as it evolves, it's now time. The time has come for what you're doing, Jason, and the College Football Players Association. The time has come for all the universities and college players to come together and say, hey, we need to work together for the betterment of this game, which is a great game.
That's really well said. Let me back up a little bit here, because we got to your NFL career. So you get drafted by the Yankees for the second time. You got the Raiders too. So you have this choice again. And he said, oh, well, it's kind of a money situation where you got, the offer from the Raiders is better. So you take the offer from the Raiders, right?
That's what I did.
And so in that first year, you get the ACL injury.
Mm-hmm.
And, I can't tell you how many players I've talked to who have similar stories, right? And that one big injury, or maybe it's the second big injury, that then things start to come undone. You feel comfortable, you want to talk about after that injury, kind of how does a playing career end then? What does it look like after that injury? And then what do things look like after you're sort of done, if you're comfortable talking about it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, thank you for asking this question, because in order to get to the level to play major college sports, or just to play college sports, it's so competitive that you have to be so focused. And that's why it's even more critical, because you're not thinking about life after sports. You're thinking about the now and getting there, playing at that level, and then going on perhaps to play professionally. So it's so critical to have an organization there that you can turn to and say, hey, can you help? What do I do? I mean, It's critical. We didn't have that. And what's really sad, I know there's a lot of players who played college football around the country, and I'm sure you've spoken with them after their college career and maybe short professional career, because in most cases it's short. It's not. Most people aren't Tom Brady.
That's right.
Or even John Elway. He had a great career. I mean, it's a short career. Because you're so myopic, when you make that transition, it's very, very difficult. And I was very fortunate, because after I played professional football, I went right into academia. I got my master's degree, and I started to, get involved in other things. But I could have easily gotten lost. And in many cases, I have struggled. There's no question. There's no doubt in my mind. Had you been around, Jason, in 1979, my life economically would have been different.
Okay.
There's no doubt about it.
I think this is what a lot of people don't understand about the project we're trying to do here, because I do think there is something transformative in just having former players in the same spaces, be it virtually or in person, being able to tell current players, yo, this is the reality of things. And here is what you need to understand. And I know you're not thinking about it right now because you're laser focused on being successful. And of course you're not thinking about it now, but you will be thinking about it. Right. And now, did you just have that one season in the NFL then?
Yeah, one season NFL. And then I still thought I could play. Back then, we didn't have the technology to repair anterior cruciate ligaments. So I thought if I'd strengthened my quads and my hamstring that would compensate. So I was also drafted by the Oakland Invaders in the USFL. And I went to training camp with the Oakland Invaders and, tried to make the team. But obviously being a running back with no anterior cruciate ligament, it was, so I remember leaving camp saying, okay, my career's over with. So,
to an extent, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Mike.
Well, no, and it was very, very difficult because you can't even get on the field if you don't completely dedicate and focus, your attention on getting there. So to switch, to make the switch and say, oh, now I'm in the real world, and it's a whole different ballgame. And there were a lot of people out there that helped me, but there's no doubt in my mind, no doubt, if we had the College Football Players Association in 1979, I would have had an organization to go to that would have understood that transition.
Mm-hmm. What about the NFLPA? Is this just before the real development of the NFLPA? It probably wasn't. Did you feel any sort of connection to the NFLPA at the time in your brief career?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the NFLPA is there. I think, they're trying to do the best that they can do. I think, they have certain, in order to, you have to serve like certain, I guess 3 years, you have to be a player to benefit. I just think that actually the best union out there is the Major League Baseball Players Union.
Why do you say that?
Well, they were the first. I mean, my father was a Major League Baseball player, and thanks to Curt Flood, if you go back, I mean, he was the one in the late 60s that took it to the Supreme Court. Yep. And, the baseball, there's no salary caps. There's no, it's just they have a great union. And I believe the College Football Players Association can have a great union with your leadership. And again, I encourage all of the alumni of great colleges and universities out there to become a member. It's what does it take, Jason, to become a member of the College Football Players Association?
Well, for former players, I mean, I'm glad you asked. I think, the membership structure, again, we had to think about something new. We had to think about something that could marshal all these players together and try to form a base from which those current players could organize. And we didn't think it was fair for high school members and current player members to be charged dues because we're talking about this very, very brief playing time, right? And most guys don't go on to the NFL. And so now in this era, let's say they get a shot to play college ball and high level college ball. Maybe that's it in terms of their lifetime earning potential. Those might be the 4 best years for the rest of their lives, right? And so we're doing no dues for high school and current player members. And then we want to marshal those former players. Okay. So for someone like you, that's an alumni member, it's $50 a year. Because we figure, all right, for $50 a year, this is a grassroots kind of effort, right? I mean, Mike, but most people don't understand is there's 900 some college football programs in this country. If you go down the line, FBS, FCS, Division I, Division II, Division III, JUCOs, NAIA, you go through all of it, right? You're talking about 80,000 or so active college football players. My best guess, you and I have tried to estimate this before. We think there's 2.5 to 3 million former players out there. And so what I thought when I started this effort was, well, shoot, if you could get 10% of them to commit to becoming an alumni member, well, shoot, that's your grassroots fundraising right there, right? That's the base you need. And then for former players who have been more successful, let's say long NFL careers, successful careers otherwise, we have a lifetime membership option that's more, what can I do here to sort of help build the institution as a whole? So that's the structure. And yeah, it is interesting. I mean, I think as we continue this series here, it's going to be great because I think people are going to get a real good sense of, well, who are these former players that are getting involved with this effort and why did they do it? And, I obviously appreciate you've gotten other alumni members for us. You're one of our best supporters in terms of former players, Mike. And so I appreciate all that. I'm thinking here as we're starting up this new series, Alumni Member of the Month. That's what we're talking. We're talking Mike Dotterer here, Stanford football alumni. Let me ask you this. I'm trying to develop a set of questions that I ask every former player that comes on here. Okay, so what's the number one lesson you learned from your playing career as you look back on it? If you wanted to say today to those current players, you wanted them to take away one thing, because, we'll be cutting this up and put it out on TikTok and everything else. What do you want to leave those current players with all your years of wisdom now, looking back on your playing career? What's that one lesson you want them to take away?
Well, thank you, Jason, for asking this question, because actually I've thought about this for years and years, and I've come down to a acronym. And the acronym is FTC. And some people say, is that the Federal Trade Commission?
I know, that's what I think.
And no, it's not the Federal Trade Commission. It's the most important advice I can give players out there, that not just football players, but athletes all around the world. F stands for got to have fun. You have to enjoy the game. That's critical, because, life is short. And if you don't enjoy it, if you're doing it just for the money or for the prestige, that's the wrong thing. You've got to enjoy whatever you do, whatever your avocation is, enjoy it. So F is fun. T, you probably know what T is, because we talked about it earlier. It's not about I. I think it was one of the great players said, there's no I in team.
No I in team, yeah.
And so it's T is team. And for all the players out there, you look back, I'm here in Las Vegas because I was fortunate enough to be a member of a Super Bowl team. Even though I didn't score the touchdowns like Marcus Allen and, throw the balls like Jim Plunkett, I was on the team and I got a Super Bowl ring.
Yeah.
And that's what really is all that matters. So the T is team. And then the C is your craft, becoming the best player you can become. And so if I could give anyone, that's listening advice, FTC, fun, team, and craft. And then I'm just hoping that all of you that are listening get in touch with Jason and join the association, get involved, because I truly think 5-10 years from now, we're going to have a great organization to represent the players, and we're going to create a legacy so that players have a voice in their future. I will say this. I think that the landscape's going to change. I think there's going to be players who play at the University of Georgia, for example, who I think don't want to go to the National Football League. They may want to just stay in Georgia and play for the rest of their career. And I think the Supreme Court is going to say, you know what, if Joe Smith or Jim Thomas or whatever the player's name is, if he wants to stay at Georgia and play, so be it. I mean, all of these, in my opinion, archaic rules. I mean, the great thing about America is the free market economy, freedom of choice, freedom to express yourself, the freedom of, the First Amendment rights. I think that's what's happening in college football right now. And so you've got to get ready for this all to happen. Unfortunately, I look back, we didn't understand. We now understand. College football is a big, big business, and the players need representation. And I want to thank you, Jason, for putting this together. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Mike, a ton. And I think it's very interesting to me because you just said, you have this view, and I agree with you. What's happening here is there is a sort of free market economy that's emerging for college football players for the first time. You said that's, you link that to American values, and I think that's very important. What's very interesting to me then, though, is you couple it with what we're doing. Because you say, but you also need collective representation, which I think is maybe a view that's emerging more and more in America. It obviously syncs with my worldview. You and I have talked about this extensively. But I think for a lot of people see a players association or a collective bargaining agreement or unionization, that these things are like antithetical to American free market values. But what you're shaking your head, and of course I shake my head, but I think a lot of people would say, oh, no, those two things don't work together. So, Mike, why do they work together from your perspective?
Well, I think you have the individual and you have the collective, and it's like yin and yang. You got to have both. It's completing the organization. It's again, I look at Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball has a minor league system. And that's
which just unionized, by the way, right? Yeah, go ahead. Yep.
Exactly. So, the minor league system of American football is college football. Yep. It's obvious to me. It's been obvious for many, many years. But, one of the things you have to deal with people is the question of power and control. And there's people that want to control the power, control the resources. And now that the cat is out of the bag, the genie's out of the bottle, no longer. I mean, everyone would agree. I haven't had anyone say to me recently that college football isn't a big, big business. And because go ahead.
No, you go.
Yeah, no. So it's obvious. And, this pushback that they're getting, it's just a matter of time. And again, this podcast that you're going to do every month with alumni, college football player association alumni members around the country, hopefully they'll go viral, and every college and university will say, hey, we need to get involved. And I think this can happen very quickly because of social media, because of this amazing technology. Things can happen much quicker than ever before in human history.
I agree. It's okay. Two threads I want to pull out here. I agree with you. I think, though, and you and I've talked privately about this. I think college football talks a lot about leadership, but I actually think nobody wants to be first. Everybody wants to be second, and nobody wants to be last, right? And so to get that first school, obviously summer of 22, we thought Penn State was going to become our first chapter, Penn State University football, right? Ended up not being the case. We've been working on other schools behind the scenes. And boy, you need that one school. You need one school to light the match. That's what we've always thought, right? And then we think there is an element. I mean, remains to be seen, obviously. But once that one school lights the match, it'll spread like wildfire because of media, because of social media, because players will then want to get involved. But man, Mike, you and I both know it's hard to get somebody to light that match, right?
Well, I think we also have to hope that this gets out to the parents. Because
that's such a good point. Yeah.
The parents, when your son or daughter is 17 years old, and I say daughter because college women's basketball, oh my gosh.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I know.
What a big, I mean, they're going to have, there's no doubt. If Dartmouth basketball is unionizing, college women's basketball
right.
is unionizing.
I know. Right, so, right.
But those parents who have 17-year-old young players, and I say players because when they go to college, it's professional athletics. That's right. what it is. We used to say student athlete. Well, yes, you can study. We're in an environment now, Jason. Education's available for everybody as long as you have an internet connection. And you can go to Khan Academy. What Salman Khan did was, if anybody wants to take on any subject, I mean, it's just a different world. So getting back to those parents, because there's parents out there that are going to listen to this.
Oh, I just talked to one yesterday. You go.
Well, your son or daughter who you love and adore, you could say to them, you could plant the seed and say, you know what? Not only are you going to be a great player at whatever college or university you go to, but you could be a leader. You could be the representative of the College Football Players Association. Those parents need to plant that seed so that young player that goes to, Nebraska says, you know what? I can not only be a great athlete, but I can be part of this collective. And that's where the parents play a critical role. So I hope that this podcast that we're starting gets out to the parents.
That's such a great point. I think I've now had a handful of conversations with parents of players, high school players, college players, getting to talk to them at different points, let's say in a recruiting process or different points along their playing career, or parents of former players who maybe were on the bad side of things of college football, and now they're 25, 26 years old trying to figure out their way around, And I think for me, you hit the nail on the head, especially now with NIL being so instrumental in the recruiting process, and there not being enough transparency around the use of NIL in the recruiting process, particularly there's no collective negotiations for sure. This is all this, an individual environment right now, right? And I think parents are like, who's protecting my kid? Who's looking out for everybody? And it seems like, boy, this really seems like a era where sort of every man for themselves, where, this comes back to what we were talking about. It's like you were saying, you need the collective to tame the power structure, to tame the structures of control, to then allow the individuals to truly flourish, right? And I think that's what we miss sometimes when we think about labor organizing, is it's not framed in that way. It's only framed from a perspective of sort of solidarity, which is of course important, but it's like, how does that solidarity then allow for the individual to flourish and not be sort of chewed up by the system or chewed up by these structures of control? So, all right, how should we end, Mike? I've been debating this. I think here at the end, what about Stanford? I want to end with your program, because I've met a lot of former Stanford players. And we have a good amount of former Stanford players as alumni members. You've helped get some of those for us. We've gotten them in other ways. I've had more talks with more former Stanford players than you can possibly imagine. I don't know what it is about Stanford. All right. But how do we get those current Stanford players? I mean, you said, these are the smart guys. And I was like, Mike, we're trying and we can't. Where's the what would you say? This is how I want to end with you, Mike. I'll end it differently every month with our player. You speak directly to current Stanford players and tell current Stanford guys why they need to join the College Football Players Association. Make it unique, because you know that institution. Speak to them.
Well, if I were in front of the players at Stanford and the future players at Stanford, I would say that we have a great tradition of football, American football. I mean, we've been playing for well over 100 years, and it's an academic school. They do have fairly highly academic standards, and because there's a responsibility. When you're a school like Stanford, you feel that you can lead, you can set an example. Again, Dartmouth is a great Ivy League school. I mean, Dartmouth is an older institution than Stanford. I mean, the Ivy Leagues, it's amazing that Dartmouth, it took Dartmouth basketball. It wasn't Stanford basketball. So I think I would challenge all of the Stanford athletes to say, hey, look what the Ivy League did here. Look what Dartmouth did. We need to get on board and get behind this. It's just a natural evolution. So I just hope I'm challenging my fellow Stanford athletes and future athletes and parents. If your son or daughter is going to Stanford, encourage them to be part of an organization, a collective organization where they can have a voice in their future when it comes to their sport. It's not something that's it's when, and I would like to see Stanford be part of that, leading the way. And again, Jason, I want to thank you for this opportunity, and excited to help in any way I can in the future.
Mike, you are a good dude. I just want to make sure to say that I met you a couple years ago or whatever it's been now, and you really do have a heart of gold. I am blessed to know you and consider you a friend now. And I think the most rewarding part of this job is the hundreds of conversations I've had with former players and hearing their stories. It so helps inform my organizing for current players. And for those like you who have supported us financially and support us in many other ways, I just want to publicly say thank you, and God bless you, brother. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jason, and very excited about the future of the organization, the College Football Players Association, as you can see back there.
I know. I love it. I love it. I got to get my backdrop. All right. That's it for today. We'll see you next time on the College Football Player Podcast. This is the Alumni Member of the Month, our very first Alumni Member of the Month, Mike Dotterer. Mike, we appreciate having you out. Take care.